So I'd like to welcome everybody to this lecture here at Basel University. It is today September 1, 2011, so we're almost exactly 10 years after the terrorist attacks. And this is the occasion why I have decided to do this lecture with the title, The Terrorist Attacks of September 2001, What Do We Know 10 Years Later? A Historical Investigation. It is obviously a very large topic, a vast field of research, and I've therefore decided to look at 10 different issues. Because we have 60 minutes, so I'm not going to talk endlessly. We're just going to go through 10 points, and I'm fully aware of the fact that further research is needed on most of these points, and I'm fully aware of the fact that, you know, there are other points which would be interesting, but which we can't discuss today. What are the issues? The first chapter is really that I look at the different stories that are available today on the attacks of 9/11. I call them surprise, LEHOP and MEHOP. I will detail what they actually mean later. Then I look in the second chapter on the 9/11 debate in the United States. In a third chapter, I will address the term conspiracies, because that term has surfaced a lot during the last 10 years. Then I will look at WT7, which is one of the buildings which was involved. Then I look at the Pentagon, which is another rather big discussion. I will look at financial transactions that took place on September 11 in the segment of put options. I will look at able danger, which is another research topic where quite a few people are working on. I will look at Osama bin Laden, of course. I will look at Northwoods and then reach the conclusion. It is very often the case that in Switzerland, lectures are in German. Okay, most of the time, lectures are in German. We have some lectures here at Basel University which are in English. This lecture here is in English because it is a lecture that we do together with Indiana University in Bloomington in the United States. They have a topic which is called Making War, Making Peace. And it's a research group which is now currently discussing these issues, war and peace. And they said, why don't you come over to the United States and give a lecture on 9/11? And I said, I'd much rather do this in Switzerland, make a videotape and send you the link. So that's what we decided upon. That's what I'm actually doing. The people in the United States who organized the lecture are Heather Reynolds, professor for biology, then Kurt Lively and Baron Bangert. And from this moment, I'd like to say, Heather and everybody else, hello in the United States. Good that we can do this international research project, as I'd like to call it, together. This is really a change that you need to be aware of. International research has been very strongly influenced by the development of modern technology, the internet, streaming videos, live conference, and all these things. I mean, 20 years ago, this would not have been possible, but today it is, so we take advantage of it. My lecture will have the exactly same topic. It will be shown in the US, I think, in October. So we're a little bit earlier here in Switzerland, and so to give you the overview again of the international framework, we're here in Switzerland. For everybody else in the United States, that's where we are. We're in Basel. Basel is in the corner where Switzerland and Germany and France meet. It's a German-speaking part of Switzerland. Switzerland is a small country with 7 million inhabitants. And the United States, obviously, over here, and Indiana University is here in the state of Indiana. Okay, let's go into the debate of 9/11. On that day, most people watch television. And they made up their mind what happened on that day, and they had, you know, a gut feeling what was happening, and they got information from the American government, from the Bush administration. Then later they read in the newspaper information on 9/11. Some then watched videos, and others started to look at the issue at the internet and further bought maybe DVDs and whatever. So you have a lot of different stories circulating on the topic of 9/11. And I'm a historian, and you must know that in the end, history is written by historians. So it's really our task at the end of the day to say what happened. And that is really difficult, that's what I have to say. And therefore, I try to, first of all, look what different stories we have on the internet, in the books, also in the public debate. And I think basically you can say we have three stories. The first story is called surprise story. It really says that bin Laden was responsible for the attack. 19 Muslims carried it out, and the administration of George Bush and Dick Cheney was surprised by the attacks. So that's the official version of the events. The second story says, no, that's not the correct narrative, and it's called LIHOP, let it happen on purpose. So LIHOP really stands for let it happen on purpose. People who think that is the correct story emphasize that yes, it was bin Laden who carried out the attacks. 19 Muslims attacked the United States, but the Bush government and Cheney are corrupt, and they knew that the attacks were coming and let them happen on purpose and sacrificed the life of 3,000 people in order then to start international wars, resource wars, grab oil and gas, reduce civil liberties, etc. And the third theory is called MIHOP, make it happen on purpose. This story says bin Laden had nothing to do with the attacks. It says all these videos we've seen from bin Laden are fake, and that criminal elements within the US Defense Department and in the Secret Services were responsible for the attack. An attack which then is called inside job on the own population. And these three theories compete, okay? They cannot be true at the same time. That's the most important thing to realize. From a logical point of view, you completely and easily recognize that not all three theories can be right at the same time. It's either the one or the other or the third. And I personally don't know which of the three is correct, okay? So what I will say at the end of the lecture is really that we need more research. But I can show you in this lecture where the debate really is, okay? Why they debate and how they debate. First question is, why is it so important to know which of the three is correct? 10 years after, you know, you could say, who cares? Maybe it was the one or the other. It is very important, I'm very strongly convinced, because peace research must tackle the issue of 9/11. What is peace research? Peace research is not an established doctrine at Basel University or many other universities. You can't go there and say, I'd like to have a master or a bachelor or a doctorate degree in peace research. You can't do that. So you can have a doctorate in history like I have. But historians are very interested in questions of war and peace. And generally, if we look at 9/11, we obviously see it has to do a lot with international peace and war events. So those people who are interested in the promotion of peace, and there's a lot of people on the globe, believe me, they are interested to know what happened on 9/11. Furthermore, 9/11 is important because right after 9/11, that's only 3 weeks after 9/11, we had the start of the war in Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan started on October 7, 2001. Most people have forgotten that it was just a few weeks after 9/11 that this war started. And if we debate the war in Afghanistan, we can only debate it in the context of 9/11. We must try to understand what happened in 9/11. The official narrative, the surprise narrative, obviously said bin Laden carried out the attacks. He is in Afghanistan, protected by the Taliban. Therefore, it is necessary to wage war against Afghanistan. That is the official narrative. What happened in Afghanistan in the meantime is that you have a new Afghan president. It is Hamid Karzai, and that is well known. And people obviously, you know, argue whether, you know, that was a good thing for Afghanistan to happen. Because if you look at the person of Hamid Karzai, some people say, that's much better than the Taliban, and others say, no, that's not much better. Allegations are, and I'm not going to go into the details of the Afghan war. Allegations are that Hamid Karzai and other parts of the Afghan government are involved in the drug trade. And people sometimes ask me, why are they involved in the drug trade? And I say, well, Afghanistan is a huge producer of drugs. And the warlords that control large parts of Afghanistan, they support the government only if the government protects them, okay? So if the Afghan government tries to pick a fight with the warlords who run the drug trade, they're out of business. So Afghanistan is very complicated, and I'm not going to talk about it at length. I'm going to talk about another event that is linked to 9/11. It is the US war against Iraq. It started on March 20, 2003. Some of you might remember that right after 9/11, there were people who tried to link 9/11 to Iraq. That was wrong from the beginning. But later, in 2003, you had this link, you know. There were quotes that, you know, Al-Qaeda is operative in Iraq, and therefore we have to go to Iraq. We means US government. So the Iraq war is another war linked to these terrorist attacks. And what happened in Iraq really is that you have a new prime minister. Now, you have Saddam Hussein, who was removed from power. That's the main event that happened there. You have the oil resources that were distributed in a new way. And you have Nouri al-Maliki, who is now the prime minister. Obviously, here again, there are huge debates whether that is a big progress or not. But then, you need to go into the details what Maliki is doing, whether he's one of those who opens Iraq for democracy, or whether he's in that old gang of political leaders who oppress their population. What we do know is that American soldiers who fought in the Iraq war, and the Iraq war is not over, there's still American troops there. It's just they're not called combat troops anymore. So the semantics has changed. But the American troops that fight there have always rationalized their presence in Iraq with reference to 9/11. There's evidence for that. We look at helmets, in history with many different sources. And we look at the helmets of US soldiers fighting in Iraq, and they make designs on their helmets. And here you can see the Pentagon and the Twin Towers. And in 2006, there was a survey which was, made in Iraq among US troops. And 85% of American soldiers said that the main mission was to retaliate for Saddam's role in the September 11 attacks. And that is really surprising, because Saddam Hussein had no role in the 9/11 attacks. So that is war propaganda. That makes your mind twisted, and it can twist your mind to such an extent that you can end up in a war where you might get killed or lose a leg just because you're not well informed. And that is really tragic. That's not a detail. Now, how did this misinformation surface? It was, first of all, this claim of weapons of mass destruction. It was Secretary of State Colin Powell who said in the United Nations Security Council in February 2003, that's 1 month before the Iraq war started, he said there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, that was a lie, okay? And that lie really started to increase the distrust globally towards the Bush administration. When people found out that the Bush administration had lied about Iraq, they went further and said, did they lie about 9/11 as well? These things are very, very closely linked. It's all about trust. Do you trust the government? Do you trust the president? Do you trust the prime minister? Or do you categorically question what they say? Colin Powell, in 2005, offered an excuse for his, lies. He said he felt terrible and apologized for having falsely presented an Iraqi weapons program that turned out not to exist. I'm the one who presented it on behalf of the United States to the world. It will always be part of my record. That is painful. So Powell is one of the very few who offered his excuses. At the same time, before the Iraq war, you had President Bush insisting on the same story. He was saying there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We must go into Iraq because otherwise Saddam Hussein will give the weapons of mass destruction to the terrorists, and you will have a new 9/11 with biological or chemical weapons. And that really scared people. So that most people then said, yes, okay, then we should do this war. Because if you ask people, do you want to go into war? Most people say no. Then you ask them again, but there's a bad, bad man out there. Do you want to go to war? And they say no. You tell them, he has weapons of mass destruction. Then they say, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to send my son. And then you ask them again, he has weapons of mass destruction, and he's going to give them to the terrorists. And somehow he was linked to 9/11, and everybody remembered that event. Then people have a strong feeling of fear. And that's politics of fear. And it really works, because then people say, I'm actually against war, but this war, I'm for it, the last